if I'm in front of my friends, not students, I'll definitely be cussing right now. This is unacceptable. Ridiculous. All right. Okay, so we are going to finish chapter 2, hopefully, if we have enough time. We might not have much time for discussion, but we'll try to get this done. Okay, so last class we talked about descriptive studies. We went over naturalistic observation, case study, survey, and correlational study. We didn't quite finish this last part, but do you have any questions regarding last class? Good. Okay, so let's do a practice question. Is this a positive or negative or a weak correlation?
C.
A weak correlation? Any other opinions? Don't get peer pressured. Yes? Negative? All right, very good. If you look at here, the R says negative 4084. It should be 0.4084. So that's how you, and this is negative. That's why I encourage you to do the practice. How many of you have played the game? 0. Okay, that's what happens. And you get this wrong on the exam if you don't do it. Are you going to do it?
Yes.
Question?
Did you post the PowerPoint?
Oh, I didn't post it.
Yeah,
that's my fault. That is my fault. If you got this wrong on the exam, I'll give you the point back. Sorry. Okay. Yes?
Okay, so what would a weak / non-correlation look like?
I am going to show you right now. Okay, so right now this is positive, pretty obvious, right? Okay. When it's close to horizontal, that would be a weak or no correlation. Does that make sense? Okay, that's why you should go play the game after I post the PowerPoint. That will help you get a better understanding what it looks like. Okay. All right. Today we are going to finish correlational studies, and we're going to talk about experimental research, replication crisis, and pseudoscience. Personally, I am very interested in these two topics. Hopefully we have some time to talk about it as a group. So correlation research, the strength is that it can test predictions, it can evaluate theories, and it helps us suggest new hypotheses. Okay. It is useful when we cannot manipulate the variables. So in some situations, we cannot manipulate variables, like we can manipulate weather, we cannot manipulate, what else? Genders, right? Okay, so the limitations is that correlation is not causation, but many people will think that when they see a correlation, they will draw a conclusion about causal effects. I am going to show you what this looks like. Okay. All right. So here is what people have done in the past. They found that the US spending on science, space, and technology is pretty much perfectly correlated with suicides by hanging, strangulation, and suffocation throughout the years. And we know that that's not a real causal effect, but it's just by coincidence they correlate with each other. And it's a high correlation, it's 99.79. And then the number of people who drowned by falling into a pool and films Nicolas Cage appeared in, it's a pretty high correlation as well, 66.6. So you get the point. Sometimes when we see correlations, it does not mean causation. Okay? All right. Next. So you can never definitively assume causation from a correlational relationship because we have this, what we call reverse causation. So here's an example. Marriage and happiness, they are positively correlated. However, does it mean that married people are more likely to be happy, or happy people are more likely to get married? We don't know, right? So that's reverse causation. And then next, we have reciprocal causation. So helping people increases happiness. However, when you are happy, you're more likely to help people. So when you experience happy, you want to experience happy again. That's why you help other people. So that's like a reciprocal causation. Does that make sense? Make sure you understand the examples that I'm giving. And then we have the third variable problem. So ice cream sales are associated with shark attacks. Do you know why?
Why?
Yes?
More people buy ice cream when it's hot out.
Yes. So summer is the third variable. When it's summer, people are more likely to consume ice creams, and they're more likely to go to the beach. Does that make sense? So the third variable is something that people usually don't consider when they are looking at correlational studies. All right. Can online students hear well? Did they complain or not? Okay. Great. All right. Any questions so far? Okay, so that's correlational studies. Make sure you understand what we talk about. That will help you prepare for the exams. Okay, next we have experimental research. The goal for experimental research is to control and explain behaviors and mental processes by systematically manipulating variables. Again, you don't need to memorize the definition word by word. I want you to understand what it means. So we are trying to compare between experimental group and the control group in an experimental research. The experimental group is the group that receives the manipulation or treatment. And the control group, they are the ones get no treatment or a placebo. So we usually try to manipulate one variable at a time and then keep all the other variables controlled for. Do you know why?
Do you have something compared to?
Yes, but why do you only manipulate one variable at a time?
Oh, so it's easier to like define what's being affected, like what's affecting what.
Okay, very good. So if you only have one thing that's different, you can pretty positive saying that's the cause if something happens, right? But if you have multiple things that are different at the same time, you don't know which one is the real cause. Okay, that's why we try to only manipulate one variable at a time during experiments. Okay. All right. So in experimental research, we will do random sampling and then random assignments to assign them into different groups. Do you know why we do that? What's the purpose for random sampling and random assignments?
So you just
Yeah.
Well, you kind of make sure that you don't have one group that is similar in some ways, so you make sure that there's the widest spread of like diversity, so it can go to the most people. I guess the results fit the most people.
Okay, which one are you talking about right now?
I was thinking the whole process. But
The whole process?
yeah,
Okay.
I mean, both of them just make sure that there's not one specific thing that you're accidentally adding in.
Okay. Okay.
That's Marcus.
Marcus. Okay.
Isn't it to make it representative of population?
Which one?
Random sampling?
Very good. So random sampling is make it representative. And you had your hand up. Do you? Okay. All right. So you kind of get the idea. You just don't know how to verbalize it, right? So first of all, random sampling or selection is to make sure the results are representative. You are taking people randomly from different places. So you get the idea, right? Do I need to go into more details why this is making it more representative? Pretty straightforward, right? Okay. Okay. If it's not straightforward, feel free to tell me too, because sometimes you just don't know how other people think, right? Individual differences based on experiences. We learn about this, right? Okay, so just let me know. And then random assignment is to control individual differences. This is, we are assigning some people randomly into experimental group and control group instead of letting them choose. For example, you know, some people with certain characteristics, they might always choose to be the experimental group, or they might always choose to be the control group, right? So we are doing it randomly. Any questions? Good? All right. So for experimental research, independent variables, they are manipulated by the experimenter. They're expected to cause a change in another variable, which is the dependent variable here. And this is the variable that's different between experimental and control groups. For dependent variables, they are expected to change as the result of the independent variable. And they depend on the independent variable. Pretty straightforward. So this is the ideal situation. We're not thinking about the third variable here, right? A lot of times when we try to control for the environment, especially in social science, we cannot control everything, as we talked about last class, right? We have to do our best to control the environment, but sometimes it's hard to control everything. Okay. So the strength for experimental research is that it tells us the cause and the effect, which is the independent and dependent variables. And it gives us more control on the variables that we are looking at. So usually we do experimental research in a laboratory environment. Okay. The limitations is the third variable, or sometimes we call it the confound variable. A lot of times we don't realize this until we get the results, and then we find something that's not consistent with our hypothesis. And then we will think about whether there are third variables. And then we have the confirmation bias for both the experimenters and the participants. Again, for experimenters, I have my hypothesis coming in, and when I get the results, I tend to look for patterns that consistent with my hypothesis, which is not scientific. And then for participants, is that they want to look better in the researcher's eyes. They don't want to look stupid when they do the test, right? Right? Okay. When you participate in psychological research, you will understand what I'm talking about. Sometimes you try to guess what they're trying to do, but they don't tell you. You're curious. Sometimes when they ask you some questions, you're going to think about, oh, should I answer this or that? Would it make me look bad? So those are all biases. Okay. Okay, practice. A health psychologist and an IO psychologists are interested in determining whether job stress has detrimental effects on health. So what the independent variable here? Anyone besides Ethan? Yes.
Job stress.
Job stress. Okay. Okay. And what would be the dependent variable here? Yes. Health. Very good. So you got it. Another practice question. A clinical psychologist would like to know whether a history of early childhood abuse is related to later vulnerability to depression, substance abuse, and addiction. What will be the independent variable? Yes.
Early childhood abuse.
Okay. And then what would be the dependent variable? Yes.
Vulnerability to depression, substance abuse, and addiction.
Very good, very good. That's awesome. I'm not asking names this time. I don't have much time. Otherwise, I'll try to remember your names, but sorry about that. An educational psychologist is studying the effectiveness of a special program for teen parents. The program provides education and support related to parenting skills and career goals. He wants to know whether participants' school performance and psychological health will improve. What will be the independent variable here? Yes.
The effectiveness of the program or the implementation of this program
Which one?
of the education.
Oh no, I mean you said two things. Which one? The effectiveness or the implementation?
The effectiveness.
The effectiveness? Okay. Yes. The program, whether they received the program or not? Okay. So we don't know whether it's effective. Okay. Very good. What about the dependent variable? Yes.
That would actually be the effectiveness. So like whether the school performance or the psychological health improves.
Yes, very good. So that's the effect of the program, right? Their performance and their psychological health. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. So if I give you an example on the exam, I'll ask you to identify the variables. You can do it? Okay, if you have questions, let me or Emily know. Okay, no questions. Let's do a practice questions regarding the research methods. So a researcher is interested in the relationship between caffeine and stress. She has participants keep a diary for a week in which they count the numbers of cup of coffee, tea, and caffeinated soda they consume. In addition, participants complete a measure of daily hassles experienced during the week. What kind of research is this? Anyone? Yes?
I would say
B, correlational? Okay. What's the variables that of interest here? So correlation, we have to have at least two variables, right?
the number of cups of coffee, tea, caffeinated soda, and the relationship between stress.
Stress? Okay.
Caffeine and stress.
Okay. All right. Any other opinions?
Yeah, I agree.
You agree? Okay. What else? What else? What else? So you all agree? Yes.
I think it's observational
Okay. Why?
because they're keeping a diary and reporting down what happens.
Okay. All right. Who agrees with what's your name?
Rebecca.
Rebecca. Who agrees with Rebecca, and who agrees with what's your name?
Jacob.
Jacob. Agrees with Jacob. Okay, some of you agrees with Rebecca. About half and half. All right. I am going to vote for Rebecca. So I think it's observational as well. So even though usually we talked about, we try to do a naturalistic observation, right? They don't know that we're observing, but here we're asking them to observe themselves. We're not really, so we all know it's not experiments, right? Because we're not manipulating. Correlational, it can be, But in this case, it's not specific. So relationship is not necessarily correlation. Does that make sense? So going in, I'm not saying, okay, are they going to, one's going up or one's going down? I'm just looking at whether there's something between caffeine and stress. Does that make sense? I know sometimes people might think, oh, that could be correlational, but you're actually adding a little bit more assumptions to this case. That's a way of thinking, and you need to be careful on the exam as well. Don't add details to the questions that I'm giving you. Use the information that I give you, and don't make assumptions. Okay? Yes?
So are you saying like the main difference between like correlational and observational is like correlational is mainly about like the relationship versus like observational is like you just plainly observing what's going on?
Yes. So if I put it more like a scientific term, is observational is more exploratory. You're trying to figure out, okay, what's there. But correlation is, you know there's a correlation. You know one goes up or the other one either goes up or down or doesn't matter. So I know they're both descriptive research. That's why there's some overlaps. But do you get the idea?
Yeah.
Okay, so one is more exploratory. The other one is you kind of get a good sense of what's going on, and then you just want to see the relationship. Does that make sense for our students? Okay, great, great. Okay, wait, I put correlation here? No, it's observational. It's observational. I think it's, I got this wrong. I'll try to make the questions better on the exam, be more definitive instead of being vague. Yeah, I agree. It could be both, but yeah, I would say it's more observational here. Okay, what about this one? Two researchers want to study whether colors really impact moods. They asked a group of participants to sit in a red room and another group to sit in a blue room for 10 minutes. Then they asked participants about their mood, whether they're calm or they're excited. What will be this? Yes? Experiment. You all agree? Anyone disagree? No one? Okay, good. Should be experiment. Because you're manipulating the room color, right? Very good. Here, several researchers are interested in comparing the pace of life in 31 countries. They operationally define pace of life as walking speed. So they went to a university of each country and watched how fast those students walk. Then they recorded and compared the average walking speed for all 31 countries. This one is pretty straightforward. What would this be? Yes?
Observational.
Do you guys agree? Okay, so this is definitely observational, right? Okay, very good. Okay. So I will try to make the questions like this instead of this one. This is a bad example question. All right. Okay, so which research method is the best? What do you guys think?
Depends on preference, I would say.
Depends on preferences?
Preference. Like, what do you prefer doing more?
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. Which research method is the best? According to you, yeah, of course. Yes?
I would say observational just because there's like almost no manipulation and you're able to observe things as they naturally are and it's more scientifically accurate.
Okay. What do you guys think? Yeah.
I think experiments are better because you can see like what really affects what.
Okay, so you can see the cause and effect. Okay, but you think naturalistic observation is more natural You see what's going on in the real world. Okay? Yes?
I would just say experimental because you have the added benefit of like absolute total control.
Okay, yeah, so you can control everything and then you know you can get rid of the alternative explanations, right? Okay, all right. I'll take one more. One more? No, I don't want you. I'm gonna point at people. Yes, you. We made eye contact. Yes.
I would say experiments because you can control all the variables
Okay.
and more clearly see like a definite cause and effect relationship.
All right, very good. You guys should speak up. There's no right and wrong questions based on your opinion. Okay. So, no single study is perfect, but yes, we do have preferences. So different research can give you alternative explanations, and they all have methodological flaws. Remember, all the slides I list the limitations and strengths, right? And all of them cannot control for everything. So more is better. If you have a hypothesis, try to use different methods to test it instead of just have one experiment and say, okay, that's it. That proves my hypothesis. We never say proves hypothesis. We say that the evidence supports our hypothesis, right? If we want to be scientific, we don't say proof. Use multiple methods to replicate findings while disproving alternative accounts. That's the best approach. Okay, so that leads to the replication crisis that I want to talk about. So replication, that's the practice of repeating a study to determine if original results are reliable. Do you remember reliable? Yes. Get the same results over time. Okay. So the replication crisis is that recent evidence suggests that many high-profile, widely cited findings from past studies do not replicate, including the study that I mentioned last class, the power post one. Okay. Possible reasons? We don't have time to let you discuss. I'll just tell you. It could be due to small sample sizes. So sometimes people might gather like 100 people or 30 people, and then they get a conclusion from that. You know the problem, right? It's not representative, might not generalize. And then publication bias. Who knows about the publication bias? I'll let you.
It's where a lot of times publishers want to have something that's like a wow factor, so places will publish things, and also you get money from it. So people will publish things even if it's not fully completed, and that can create problems.
Yes, so yes, publication bias is that publishers, they want cool findings, right? They want eye-catching findings. So if you find a link between two variables, that's more interesting than you didn't find anything, right? So they tend to publish those. It can create a whole lot of problems. It's that we have false positive. Sometimes you find the relationship just in chance, by chance. It's not there. Just coincidentally, you found the pattern. Also, it could be leading researchers to have some questionable research practices, like manipulating data, which is super unethical. Shouldn't do that. So that's a problem. Potential solutions we have is to changing the incentives for researchers and journal editors. So encourage them to publish no findings. No findings means you didn't find a relationship between two variables. And then encourage them to replicate and then publish replication findings. So it's usually that when we replicate past findings, publishers don't want to publish that because they think, oh, this study has been done before. There's no reason for you to do it again. But actually, there's value. If you do it again, you find the same findings, it helps support that hypothesis, right? That's why we said that theory has been tested several times through different research or different researchers. Changing the norms of scientific practice. So try to encourage larger sample sizes and pre-registering studies. So pre-registering studies means that we publish the hypothesis, the methods, and how are we going to analyze data ahead of time. So before we actually do it, we tell everyone that this is what we're going to do. Instead of when we are looking at the results, we change our hypothesis later. Does that make sense? Okay. And then increase transparency is to share data and materials. Right now, people kind of a little bit selfish. They don't want to share everything because they don't want other people to find what they find. And a lot of times, articles are so expensive. Right? We should change that. Okay, pseudoscience. How much time do we have left? 7 minutes? Okay. This should be fun. So pseudoscience is practices that appear to be and claim to be science, but do not actually use the scientific method to come to their conclusions. Is hypnosis a pseudoscience?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, so for those who doesn't know, hypnosis is a technique to make individuals enter a state of consciousness involving focused attention and reduced peripheral awareness, so they're more relaxed, which enhances the capacity to respond to suggestion. So Louis said that is a pseudoscience. What do you guys think? Science or pseudoscience? Pseudoscience? Who think this is science? No one?
Sigmund Freud.
Huh?
Sigmund Freud.
Sigmund Freud, he will use this method. Okay, so most of you agree this is pseudoscience, right? Okay, so actually, this is controversial. A lot of people do think it's pseudoscience, but many psychologists and many clinicians, they believe this is actually effective. So research shows that hypnosis is actually very effective for people who are trying to lose weight and quit smoking. But it also depends on the individual. For some people, it doesn't work. But when they do experiments, this works better than control group. All right, so it's controversial, but nowadays many psychologists think this is legit. All right, question? No question? Okay. What about Myers-Briggs personality test? Do you guys know what this is?
I've heard it before, but I forgot what it was.
Okay, so this is a personality test. It gives you 4-digit code, such as ESTJ, INFP, things like that. So that stands for extroversion, sensing, thinking, judgment, introversion, intuition, feeling, perception. This is super popular, especially in schools, companies, and dating apps. Sometimes you see people say, I am something, 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 and I want to find someone who's something, something. How many of you have done this test? Okay, some of you. Why did you do it? Okay, a lot of you, actually. Why did you guys do it? Yeah.
It was a requirement in freshman business initiative.
Business school?
In like the FBI class.
Okay.
It was one of the requirements.
Okay, all right. What about you guys? Did you just take it for fun, or yeah?
Well, we had to do it like in high school because our school got really into like personality stuff and how to change our teaching based off that. But I'm pretty sure it's like a bunch of BS.
Okay, so you think it's
It's
BS?
like proving it wrong.
Okay. What about you guys? Career choices? Yeah.
I'm just like narcissistic and I wanted to know.
Okay. All right. You wanted to know, or you're just curious, right? Yeah. That's a better term.
Mine was the same. We just had to do it in high school.
In high school, if you go to the career center, they might ask you to do it too, to help you find a career path, like what should be majoring. So this is pseudoscience. This is BS. The problem is that so many companies, so many schools implement this. A lot of coaches, life coaches, they tell you to do this, and then yeah, you know your personality, but nah, it's bullshit. So the problem, do you remember what we need for it to be a good measure? There are two things. Reliability and validity. Very good. So this is, first of all, it's not valid. It measures more of a person's preferences instead of their traits or characteristics. So you're not really measuring where you are as a person, but more as like your preferences at the time, which leads to the reliability problem. Is when you take it a month later, you're very likely to get a different result, a different 4-digit code. Also, they are all flattering. So it doesn't matter what you get, you will be pretty happy about the result. It's like, it's all about good things, but we know some personalities are not good, right? That's why we like some people and we don't like some people. Yeah?
Have you heard of the Enneagram test?
What's the name?
I was going to ask if the Enneagram, like you, like on a scale, like you're a number from 1 to 9, like based on your personality.
Actually, I might have. I've seen so many. I maybe not remember the name. You could send me a link later.
I was going to say take it and then share the results next class.
All right. Okay, so we still have 1 minute. So another thing is that I lost my train of thought. Give me a second. Not reliable, not valid. I talked about that, right? Okay. Oh, okay. One last thing is when you get your code, you might think, oh, this applies to me. Like it's pretty accurate. But if you look for the codes that's the exact opposite of your code, look at the description. It kind of applies to you too. So it's like it kind of applies to everyone. And also it's kind of confirmation bias. You look for the ones that apply to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, very good. Applications. Don't be sheeple. Be critical. Examine the methods when you see any findings. Who conducted the studies? Make sure the sources are credible. Usually .org is more credible than .com. Do your biases influence your interpretation? So everyone has biases. Like when I complain about a computer here, I have my biases. Know that. And anecdote does not equal reality. When people say, yeah, I experienced this, don't listen to that. Just say, okay, maybe it applied to you, but not everyone. Can't pronounce that. How do you pronounce it? Falsifiability. Make sure it's falsifiable. It's not just subjective. That's it. We don't have time for questions, but reminder, quiz 3 is due Monday. Assignment 1 is coming soon, and I'll give you more details. In the next class, we are talking about chapter 3, which is human development. Very interesting topic. I will try to tell them to fix the computer next time so we don't have this kind of experience again.
Are you going to put up the PowerPoint?
Yes. If I don't by tonight, send me an email. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.